Hello friends. Research on the personality traits of men and women shows that there are certain, though not significant, differences between us. Sit back, give us your likes and subscriptions, and let's get started. But what role do these differences play in life? Popular psychologist Christian Jarrett tackles this complex and controversial question, and we're with him. The old saying goes that men and women are so different that they seem to inhabit different planets. This statement amuses some and angers others. While the physical differences between the sexes, in size and anatomy, are obvious, the question of differences in the psychology of men and women is much more complex and ambiguous. And when psychologists do find such differences, there is usually a debate about whether they are innate, i.e., biological, or acquired. In other words, are men and women born different, or are they made different by society? This question is particularly difficult to answer when it comes to personality traits. According to most studies, men do differ from women in some important personality traits. But what explains this difference, biology or the influence of society? And how important a role does it play in our lives? And before we move on, I want to recommend you the best platform for earning and investing, Bybit. And that's not all. As a bonus, I offer you $1,000 for registration together with Bybit, link in the description. According to some scientists, the differences are mostly insignificant, but their cumulative effect can be quite powerful. The results of one of the most important studies in this area were published in 2001. Researchers Paul Costa asked more than 23,000 men and women from 26 different cultures to fill out personality questionnaires. Regardless of cultural background, women generally attributed qualities such as warmth, friendliness, anxiety, and shyness to themselves. Men, on the other hand, were more likely to describe themselves as persistent and open to new ideas. In the language of personality psychology, women, on average, were dominated by two of the so-called Big Five personality trait. In contrast, an aspect of extroversion was more pronounced in men, as well as an aspect of openness to experience that was not specific to women. Similar results were found in a 2008 study in which more than 17,000 people from 55 different cultures completed questionnaires. Again, women scored higher on neuroticism and willingness to negotiate, as well as on conscientiousness. Critics of this methodology point out that participants were asked to rate themselves. The differences are related to the fact that they described themselves in accordance with society's expectations regarding their gender roles. But another study by McRae and colleagues found similar results. 12,000 people in 55 different cultures were asked to rate not only themselves but also the personalities of men and women they knew well. In addition, a number of studies have shown that personality differences between the sexes emerge at a very early age. For example, one experiment, the results of which were published in 2013, looked at the temperament of 357 pairs of twins at the age of 3. It found that the boys in the pairs were generally more active, while the girls were more shy, attentive, and better at controlling their behavior. And apparently, the differences between the sexes persist into old age. In another experiment, scientists studied the personality traits of women and men between the ages of 65 and 98. As with younger people, older women exhibited traits such as neuroticism and willingness to negotiate more clearly than older men. Experts in evolutionary psychology interpret these findings as follows. The psychological traits of modern humans are echoes of survival mechanisms that our distant ancestors had to develop, and those mechanisms were different for men and women. So a more caring woman is more likely to protect her offspring from potential adversity, and a more courageous male is more likely to succeed in reproduction. And these traits would be inherited by successive generations, evolutionists argue. Some scientists disagree with such a purely biological explanation of human behavior. In their view, this approach ignores the sociocultural factors that determine our personality and behavioral patterns. Of course, these social factors play a role, but the results of the aforementioned cross-cultural studies by Costa, McRae and others show that average personality differences between men and women are most pronounced in more developed societies with gender equality, such as Western Europe and the USA, and not in Asia and Africa, where gender equality. These findings contradict the claim that human personality develops according to societal expectations based on traditional gender roles. Innate biological factors that influence personality differences are more pronounced in cultures that have achieved higher levels of gender equality. This explanation is reinforced by what we know about the role of genes and environment in shaping personality traits. Thus, differences in personality traits between boys and girls appear at a very early age. Differences are also revealed by implicit tests, indicating that the subject does not have a conscious choice with stereotypes. Another way to study this phenomenon is to use implicit personality tests. For example, scientists measure the reaction time of a subject who has to press keys on a keyboard when he hears different words. In this way, researchers can determine how much a person associates with words that describe different personality traits. Because the participants do not know that the reaction rate is the goal of the experiment, the results of such studies can be considered pure. The subjects cannot try to meet society's expectations regarding gender roles. A team of scientists led by Michelangelo Vianello took this approach in 2013 with more than 14,000 people surveyed via a website. The level of personal gender differences found by the researchers was 3 times lower than in studies using standard personality questionnaires. However, implicit tests revealed statistically significant differences in personality traits, especially pronounced in women, in whose personality the criteria of neuroticism and readiness for work prevailed. The debate over the extent of gender differences in psychology does not end there. A number of scientists believe that detailed analysis can reveal differences between men and women in a broader range of personality traits. Jana Weisberg of Linfield College in the US and a group of colleagues examined 2 aspects of each of the 5 major personality traits in 2011. The study included more than 2,500 people. For example, aspects of extroversion include enthusiasm and persistence, while neuroticism is characterized by emotional instability and withdrawal. The researchers identified gender differences in each of the 10 aspects of personality examined. Women in general are characterized by enthusiasm, compassion, politeness, discipline, emotional instability, restraint and openness. And for men, perseverance, diligence and intelligence. However, Weisberg and colleagues note that the gender differences they found are quite small. Their scores are generally consistent with those found by McRae and others in large cross-cultural studies. Personality differences are so great that men and women can be considered as 2 different biological species. But Weisberg and her colleagues conclude that although gender differences may play an important role in shaping human experience and culture, they are probably not so great as to make effective communication between men and women impossible. This idea is challenged by Marco Del Giudice's research group at the University of Turin. Gender differences in character are very similar to gender differences in appearance. Each individual feature, nose length, eye size, and so on, shows slight differences between male and female faces. However, many psychologists believe that there are more similarities between men and women. The debate about the extent and causes of gender differences in personality is likely to rage for many years to come. It seems reasonable to assume that at least some differences exist. But the key word here is average. Whichever study we prefer, there is still much more in common between the 2 sexes. Also, we should remember that we are talking specifically about personality traits, not all aspects of thought process and behavior in general. At the same time, it should be noted that this is not an idle question. There is a growing awareness among scientists of the role that personality traits play in our life choices as well as in our state of mental health. A better understanding of individual differences will help us ensure equal opportunities for all members of society. This means more effective mental health care. Researchers often emphasize the risk of overestimating gender differences, but the opposite is also true, Del Giudice notes. By downplaying these differences, we deprive ourselves of very important knowledge about ourselves and those around us. He continues, for generations, men have shaped women's identities and vice versa. We are the product of this amazing and complex process. And this expands our view of the world and makes it less superficial.